Greetings. I want to briefly talk to you about the discussion sections, considered one of the most important parts of the study. Now, to get an understanding of the discussion section, you have to get an understanding of the whole study. So let's take a look at that. The whole study is really in the shape of, or the shape of articles in the shape of an hourglass. So it starts very broad-based at the introduction, and eventually it'll get a little bit more specific till you have your research question. So if I'm looking at, what creates chemistry in college students, in a dating relationship, I'm going to start with very broad statements and eventually, so therefore the purpose of this study is to look at chemistry in college students, or what creates chemistry in college students as a research question. Now here's some examples. If you'll notice at the very first sentence in the introduction, college dating is a complex social process. See how broad it is. But as we go down to the very last sentence, the present study was conducted to try to determine the structure of specific variables related to chemistry. And so it's a lot more specific, and it's going to maybe list those specific variables. You may end with a research question. Therefore, the purpose of this research study is to ask this question: what creates chemistry in college students? Now, the shape of the article, as we get into the literature review, it is probably the most specific because it's all the specific details. According to Smith, there are 140 males and 85 freshmen in this particular study, those type of things. As we get to the discussion section, this is the part I want to focus on. It goes from a little bit more specific into broad again. So physical attractiveness was the most frequently stated variable, and this variable was of primary importance. And then it goes very broad. At the end, you'll see the last sentence: physical attractiveness, a basic structure in the formation of chemistry. So you're going to be writing that way, big, specific, and then going back to broad one more time. So let's take a look at that. There are 6 parts to the discussion section for the most part that you want to try to reach. You want to reinstate the research question and maybe state the major findings. So the first one is just, the purpose of the study was to look at chemistry in college student dating. And therefore, you can say it as a sentence, or you can do it as a question, or the question was this. And then you should give a summation of what you found out. What found out there were 6 components to research, and you can just sort of list those fairly quickly. That's in that first part. In the second part, you want to explain the meaning of the literature review and why they are important. So in doing that, you want to explain what you found out. So what you found out, there were 6 key areas, and then you want to elaborate a little bit more. But don't give the research again necessarily. You may, at some point, tie that in, but that's not the point. The point is to sort of elaborate and to synthesize information and put it together. So an example, after reading the discussion section, you want the reader to think about the results. Why did this happen? You don't really want them to, go back and look at the lit review again, figure out, well, what was the key points? So remind them of the key points and then sort of expand on your succinct summary that you had given before. If there's 6 areas, start to expand on those 6 areas. Part 3, you want to relate the findings to similar studies. This is where you're going to bring some of your previous research in. Not all your research in your lit review, but some of the basic theoretical foundations about love, the basic theories about chemistry, or the key areas that you may have found about chemistry, especially if there's a really good study that you want to point out. So tie those back in. And then part 4, you want to consider the alternative explanations to findings. Is there a reason? Well, let's say, is it important to remember that the purpose of the research is to discover or not to prove? So you're not to prove that chemistry is these 6 points, but what we've discovered is that chemistry is related to these 6 areas in order with college relationships or dating, that type of thing. The last point is that when writing the discussion section, you should carefully consider all possible explanations of the study results rather than just those that fit the prior assumptions or biases. So you may want to even tie in other stuff that might exist related to chemistry or other online dating kind of components. Be a little bit careful with this, but there remember says consider alternative explanations. It could be that there really isn't anything to consider, and this part of section 4 may actually be left out. Now, number 5, you want to acknowledge the study's limitations. You really want to explain what you didn't find. If your study was about college students, but you really didn't find any studies about college students, and you only found it about adults, or you found about online dating, you have to, basically take a lot of pieces and kind of build a case for it. You want to acknowledge those things in your study. Describe the lack of generalizability your research has to other situations. Like you can just say that this study, is specific to this area, but it may not apply to outside the United States, as an example. Maybe note any unanswered questions or issues your study did not address. It did not address dating of people under 21. It didn't address issues around chemistry and divorce or whatever thoughts that may come to mind. Finally, the last part, part 6, is make suggestions for further research. Since your study did not address certain things, that's a really key point. This study can now go into looking at underage dating online. It could take a look at Facebook as an option. It could take a look at this area, B, C, D, E, F, G. So it's a chance to give the reader, says, well, you know what, I could do a study on this area. So it's just giving them possibilities for more things. So this should cover everything you need, hopefully, for the study. All right, wish you best of luck, and we'll see you online.